No one knew how to cure the sick rich man, but a carpenter notices something strange, and Harrison Sterling was known throughout Chicago as the most powerful construction tycoon in the industry, owner of a fortune estimated at billions of dollars. For 4 months he had been confined to the presidential suite at City General Hospital, unable to speak or eat normally, while the country's best doctors couldn't figure out what was causing his mysterious jaw paralysis. It was in this scene of desperation that Caleb Miller, a humble 45-year-old carpenter and father of 3, walked into room 1204 carrying his toolbox. He had been called in simply to fix the built-in wardrobe with the stuck door, but as he observed the patient lying motionless in bed, something caught his attention. It was the strange way the man tried to move his mouth whenever his wife left the room, as if he wanted to say something urgent. "Good morning, Mr. Harrison," said Caleb, greeting him respectfully as he organized his tools. "I'm here to fix your wardrobe." The tycoon could only manage to let out a muffled sound, his eyes darting anxiously between Caleb and the door. Eleanor Sterling, an elegant 52-year-old woman with perfectly styled blonde hair, walked in at that moment with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Ah, you must be the carpenter," she said, adjusting the pearl necklace around her neck. "Please be quick. My husband needs silence to recover." "Of course, Mom, I'll work very quietly," Caleb replied, noticing how Harrison's eyes quickly shifted toward his wife when she mentioned recovery. As Caleb worked on the wardrobe latch, he discreetly observed the interactions in the room. Samantha Sterling, the couple's only daughter, a 28-year-old with a business administration degree, was constantly coming and going, always carrying papers and talking on the phone about urgent company matters. "Mom, Doctor, Bennett wants to talk to us about transferring Dad to that clinic in Rochester," Samantha said, lowering her voice. "He thinks they might have more advanced resources there." "No." Eleanor's response was too firm, almost aggressive. "I mean, it's still too early. Dr. Harrison always said a trip right now would be too risky for him." Caleb pretended to be focused on the screw he was removing, but he noticed how Harrison tried to turn his head toward the 2 women when the trip was mentioned. His eyes seemed desperate, as if he wanted to scream something but couldn't. Dr. Harrison, the family's private physician for over 15 years, was a 60-year-old man, always very attentive to Eleanor. Caleb noticed he visited the patient 3 times a day, always with a prepared syringe that he injected into the IV. "How's our patient today?" the doctor asked, adjusting his glasses as he checked the monitors. "No changes," Eleanor replied quickly. "He still can't speak or chew properly. Sometimes I think he's getting worse." Caleb noticed that whenever someone mentioned the company's Sterling Foundations, Harrison made a specific eye movement toward the nightstand beside the bed. It was a subtle gesture that everyone dismissed as spasms from the illness, but Caleb began to suspect there was something more to it. "All done, Mr. Harrison," Caleb said after fixing the latch. "The wardrobe is working perfectly now." As he was packing up his tools, Caleb pretended to drop a screw near the nightstand. When he bent down to pick it up, he saw Harrison desperately trying to point at the bottom drawer with his eyes. The movement was almost imperceptible, but Caleb got the message. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The following week, Caleb was called back to the hospital to replace the bathroom door hinge. This time he arrived earlier and observed the room's routine more closely. Mrs. Martha, the family's private cook who brought the special meals from home, was a woman of simple appearance, but Caleb noticed that she always spoke in whispers with Eleanor. "His food is here, Mrs. Eleanor," said Martha, handing over a thermal lunchbox. "I made that special smoothie you asked for, with the... what do you call them? The vitamins you bought at the pharmacy." "Perfect, Martha. Keep following exactly the recipe I gave you," Eleanor replied, taking the lunchbox with excessive care. Caleb pretended to be measuring the door while watching Eleanor mix something powdery into the smoothie before giving it to her husband. Harrison tried to turn his face away from the spoon, but his wife insisted with a patience that seemed forced. "Come on, sweetheart. You need to eat," To stay strong, she said, her sweet voice contrasting with the firmness with which she held her husband's chin. After the meal, Caleb noticed that Harrison's symptoms always worsened. His jaw became even more rigid, and he lost any mobility he had managed to recover during the morning. That afternoon, Caleb decided to take a risk. When everyone left the room for a meeting with the doctors, he approached Harrison. "Mr. Harrison, can you hear me?" he whispered. The businessman's eyes lit up, and he managed to blink once, clearly. "If you understand everything, blink twice." Harrison blinked twice with visible effort. "Do you want me to open that drawer?" Caleb pointed to the bedside table. 2 more blinks. With his heart racing, Caleb opened the drawer and found property transfer documents, powers of attorney signed with future dates, and an unfinished handwritten letter that began, "If something happens to me, investigate my—" "My God," Caleb murmured, realizing the seriousness of the situation. "What are you doing there?" Eleanor's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Caleb turned around, quickly hiding the papers. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Eleanor. The screw fell back here and I was looking for it." "Don't touch my husband's personal things," she said, her voice icy. "Finish your work and leave." Eleanor's nervousness was evident. Her hands trembled slightly as she reorganized the papers in the drawer, and she shot Caleb a threatening look. That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. His wife, Sarah, noticed his restlessness. "Caleb, what's wrong? You've been different since you came back from the hospital." "Sarah, I think I witnessed something very wrong. That rich man, he's not sick. Someone is hurting him." "Caleb, are you sure? These are very powerful people. Maybe it's better not to get involved." "But what if it were me? What if someone were poisoning me and you knew about it? Wouldn't you want someone to help me?" Sarah sighed, knowing her husband's kind heart. "You need to be very careful." "Promise?" The next day, Caleb returned to the hospital with the excuse of checking that the work had been done well. This time, he observed the family dynamics more closely. Samantha was visibly stressed, arguing on the phone with someone about bank deadlines and pending signatures. "No, it can't wait any longer," she said, pacing nervously through the hallway. "I need his signature by Friday, or we'll lose the funding for the mall project." Julian Sterling, Harrison's brother-in-law and minority partner in the company, showed up at the hospital with a worried expression. He was a 50-year-old man, always well-dressed, but Caleb noticed the sweat on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "Eleanor, we need to talk about the company's situation," said Julian, pulling her aside. "The banks are pressuring us. If Harrison doesn't sign those documents soon, we're going to have serious problems." "He will sign," Eleanor replied firmly. "He just needs to improve a little more." "Eleanor, it's been 4 months. Maybe it's time to consider a medical power of attorney, declaring him temporarily incapacitated." Caleb saw Harrison's eyes fill with tears as he listened to this conversation. Determined to act, Caleb sought out Samantha at the hospital cafe during his break. "Excuse me, Miss Samantha," he said, taking off his cap. "May I speak with you for a minute?" "Of course, Mr. Caleb. Is the locker working well?" "Yes, it is, but it's about your father that I wanted to talk." Samantha looked at him curiously. "About my father?" "Ms. Samantha, I know it's none of my business, but have you noticed that your father always gets worse after the meals that come from home?" Samantha stopped stirring her coffee and looked at Caleb with full attention. "What do you mean by that?" "I've worked in hospitals for many years, and I've seen a lot of things. Your father, he's not sick. Someone is doing something to him." "That's a very serious accusation, Mr. Caleb. Are you sure about what you're saying?" "Yes, I am, and there's one more thing. Your father can understand everything. He communicates through his eyes. If you want to test it, ask questions only he would know how to answer, and ask him to blink once for yes and twice for no." Samantha was silent for a few seconds, processing the information. "If this is true, my God, this would change everything. That's why I came to talk to you. I think you're the only person he completely trusts." That afternoon, Samantha discreetly tested what Caleb had said. When she was alone with her father, She asked questions about details only he would know, the name of the family's first dog, where he had hidden her 15th birthday present, what his favorite childhood dessert was. For each question, Harrison answered correctly through blinks. Samantha felt a mix of relief and horror upon realizing that her father was conscious and trapped in his own body. "Daddy," she whispered, holding his hand. "If someone is hurting you, blink twice." Harrison blinked twice, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Is it Mom?" asked Samantha, her voice trembling. Harrison closed his eyes for a long moment, as if the question caused physical pain. Then, slowly, he blinked twice. Samantha left the room with the world collapsing on her shoulders. How could she confront her own mother about something so terrible? She looked for Caleb in the hallway. "Mr. Caleb, I need your help. I don't know what to do. First, you need to find out how they're doing this to him. Then we'll think of a way to help." Caleb suggested they observe Martha, the cook, more closely. The next day, Samantha arrived at the hospital earlier and pretended to be waiting in the hallway when Martha brought the food. "Good morning, Martha," Samantha greeted. "May I see what you brought for Dad today?" Martha seemed nervous. "Oh, I brought the usual vitamin drink, plus a nice nutritious little soup. What vitamin drink is that? Did the doctor prescribe something new?" "Your mother asked for it. She said it was to help with his recovery." Samantha picked up the vitamin drink and pretended to examine it. "It has a different smell. What did you put in it?" "Oh, Miss Samantha, I just follow your mother's instructions. She's the one who buys the medications at the pharmacy and teaches me how to prepare it." When Martha walked away, Samantha kept a small sample of the vitamin drink in a vial she had brought. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Caleb knew a trusted pharmacist in the neighborhood where he lived. Benson was an honest man who had worked in his profession for 30 years and had helped Caleb before when his children were sick. "Benson, I need a very special favor," Caleb said, handing him the vial with the sample. "Can you analyze this and tell me what's in it?" "Of course, Caleb, but why do you want to know?" Caleb told the pharmacist the whole story, and Benson listened with growing concern. "If it's what you're thinking, this is a very serious situation. I'll analyze it today and call you tomorrow." The next day, Benson called with results that confirmed Caleb's worst fears. "Caleb, this vitamin contains a substance called botulinum toxin in very specific doses. It's the same principle used in cosmetic treatments, but in a different amount. It can cause temporary muscle paralysis if administered continuously. And that would explain why he can't move his mouth." "Exactly. And the worst part is that the person stays conscious but can't move properly. It's torture." Caleb felt a cold rage rising in his chest. How could anyone do that to another human being, let alone to their own husband? He sought out Samantha again and shared the results. The young woman went pale. "Oh my God, Mr. Caleb, my mother has been poisoning my father for months. Now we need to figure out a way to stop this without putting his life at risk." "But why would she do this? They've been married for 30 years. Caleb remembered the documents he had seen in the drawer. "Miss Samantha, I think it has to do with money. Your father was trying to show me some papers. Maybe he found something out before he got sick." Samantha decided to investigate the family's business more carefully. She had access to the company's systems and began reviewing the accounts from the past few months. What she discovered shook her deeply. Julian, her uncle, had taken out a series of personal loans using the company's properties as collateral. The total amount came to $50 million. In addition, Eleanor had opened several accounts in her own name and transferred significant sums from the joint account she shared with Harrison. But the most disturbing discovery was a purchase document for a private psychiatric clinic in Rochester, made in Eleanor's name 3 weeks before Harrison fell ill. "She planned everything," Samantha murmured, feeling nauseous. "She wanted to declare my father mentally incompetent and have him committed far away from everyone." Caleb found Samantha crying at the hospital cafe. "Miss, did you find something?" Through her tears, Samantha told him everything she had found. "Mr. Caleb, I don't know who to trust anymore. My own mother. How could she do this? Sometimes greed turns good people into monsters, Caleb said, placing his hand on the young woman's shoulder in a fatherly gesture. But now we have to focus on saving your father. How? First, we have to stop giving him that poisoned vitamin, but we have to be careful so your mother doesn't suspect anything. Samantha and Caleb devised a plan. She would start arriving at the hospital before her mother and would swap the poisoned vitamin for a regular one bought at the pharmacy. What if she notices that Dad is getting better? Then we'll have to speed things up, but one thing at a time. In the first few days of the plan, Harrison began showing signs of improvement. He could move his fingers a little, and his facial expressions became more mobile. Eleanor noticed the changes and was visibly unsettled. "Dr. Harrison, don't you think this sudden improvement is strange?" she asked the private doctor. "Could it be some kind of surge before a decline?" "It's possible, Eleanor. I'll increase the dose of the muscle relaxant in the IV," the doctor replied, unaware that he was being manipulated. Caleb realized that Dr. Harrison was merely a tool in Eleanor's hands. The man truly believed he was helping the patient. One afternoon, Caleb decided to approach the doctor directly. "Doctor, may I ask a question?" he said, pretending to adjust a hinge. "Of course, my friend, go ahead." "Have you ever seen a case like Mr. Harrison's?" "No, it's quite unusual. A specific paralysis of the jaw without any other apparent causes. Very intriguing from a medical standpoint. And isn't there any test that could uncover the cause?" "We've run every imaginable test. MRI, CT scan, blood work, all normal." "And a test for poison?" asked Caleb, feigning innocence. The doctor paused and looked at Caleb with interest. "Why do you ask?" "Oh, doctor, I watch a lot of those crime investigation shows on TV. I'm always thinking about things like that." "Interesting you should mention that. We actually haven't run specific toxicology tests. Eleanor has been very involved in his treatment, even bringing food from home to make sure he eats well." Caleb could see he had planted a seed of doubt in the doctor's mind. The next day, Dr. Harrison ordered a full battery of toxicology tests for Harrison, claiming he wanted to rule out every possibility. Eleanor became visibly nervous at the request. "But doctor, why these tests now? Harrison is actually improving." "That's exactly why, Eleanor. I want to understand what's causing this improvement so we can replicate the treatment." Caleb and Samantha knew they had little time. If the tests no longer detected the botulinum toxin in Harrison's system, Eleanor might try another way to harm him. That night, Samantha confronted her mother at home. "Mum, we need to talk about Dad." "What is it, dear?" asked Eleanor, without looking up from the magazine she was reading. "I think Dad is being poisoned." Eleanor froze for a second before forcing a laugh. "Samantha, what an imagination! Your father is sick, you know that." "Mom, I know about the botulinum toxin in the vitamin. I know about the documents Dad was trying to show me. I know everything." Eleanor's face changed completely. The mask of the devoted wife fell away, revealing a cold and calculating expression. "You don't understand anything, Samantha. Your father wanted to donate our fortune to those charity organizations. He was going to leave us destitute." "Destitute? Mom, even if he donated half of everything, we'd still be rich." "Easy for you to talk about being rich. You've never had to fight for anything in your life. But I came from poverty, and I know what it's like to have nothing. I'm not going back there." "And Uncle Julian, is he involved too?" Eleanor hesitated before answering. "Julian has debts. Dangerous people are collecting. If your father found out, he'd fire him from the company and he'd lose everything. So you decided to end Dad's life. Not end it, just control him until we managed to sort out our financial situation. Then we'd stop the medication and he'd get better." 4 months, Mum. He's been suffering for 4 months. Eleanor stood up, her voice growing more aggressive. "And you're going to ruin everything now, after we've come this close to solving our problems." "Our problems? Mum, these are your problems, and Uncle Julian's. Dad has nothing to do with this." The argument intensified, with Eleanor trying to convince her daughter that Harrison would never know a thing, and that it would be better for everyone if things stayed the way they were. Samantha realized her mother had completely lost her sense of right and wrong. The obsession with money and status had transformed the woman she knew into a stranger. "Mom, that's enough for today. I'm not going to let you keep torturing my father. If you say anything, you'll destroy our family," Eleanor threatened. "Think carefully, Samantha. Think about your reputation, the future of the company, everything we've built. The family was already destroyed the moment you decided to poison my father." Samantha left home that night and went straight to the hospital. She needed to protect her father and was certain that Eleanor would try something desperate now that she had been discovered. She found Caleb finishing up a shift on another floor. "Mr. Caleb, I confronted my mother. She confessed everything. And now? Now she knows that I found out. I'm afraid of what she might do." Caleb thought for a moment. "Miss Samantha, I think it's time to bring in the medical authorities. Dr. Harrison is an honest man. If we explain everything to him, he'll help us." The next day, Samantha and Caleb went to see Dr. Harrison together. The doctor received them in his office. "Doctor, we need to tell you something very serious about my father," Samantha began. For an hour they reported everything: Caleb's observations, the vitamin tests, the financial discoveries, and finally Eleanor's confession. Dr. Harrison went pale. "My God, this means I've been involuntarily participating in—" "You didn't know, Doctor," said Caleb. "You were deceived too. But now we know," Samantha finished, "and we need to save my father." The doctor immediately suspended all the medications he had been instructed by Eleanor to administer and requested that a nurse he trusted completely take charge of Harrison's meals. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing, when Eleanor arrived at the hospital that afternoon with the usual vitamin, she was intercepted by Dr. Harrison. "Eleanor, we need to talk about Harrison's treatment." "Of course, Doctor. What's the matter?" "I've decided to completely change the protocol. As of today, he'll only receive hospital medication, nothing from home anymore. But Doctor, the vitamin has been helping so much. Eleanor, the toxicology tests I ordered detected substances that shouldn't be in Harrison's system, substances that cause muscle paralysis." Eleanor's face went white. "I don't understand what you're saying." "I think you do, and I think it's time you explained a few things." Faced with the medical evidence, Eleanor tried one last move. She claimed she was following another doctor's instructions, that she believed she was helping her husband, that she didn't know the substances could do any harm. But her lies contradicted themselves, and it soon became clear that she knew exactly what she was doing. Dr. Harrison forbade her from bringing any food or medication to Harrison and instructed hospital security to monitor her visits. Desperate, Eleanor went to Julian. "Everything went wrong, Julian. They found out about the vitamin." "What do you mean they found out? You told me it was impossible. It was that damn Carpenter. He noticed something and told Samantha. And now? I owe $15 million to people who don't play around, Eleanor. We have to speed up the transfer to Rochester. Today." "But how?" "Harrison is improving. We can't claim anymore that he's in a vegetative state. Then we'll have to create a medical emergency, something that justifies an immediate transfer." Julian stared at his sister-in-law in horror. "Eleanor, how far are you willing to go?" "As far as I need to in order to save our lives." Caleb, who was working in the hallway near where they were talking, overheard fragments of the conversation. He ran to find Samantha. "Miss Samantha, they're planning something for today. I heard your mother talking about transferring your father to Rochester today." "But how? Dr. Harrison would never authorize a transfer now." "I think they're going to try to force an emergency situation." Samantha ran to her father's room and found Harrison visibly better. He could already move his fingers and had recovered some of his facial movements. "Dad, can you hear me clearly?" Harrison managed to emit a low sound that seemed like a yes. "Mom and Uncle Julian are trying to transfer you out of the country. I need to protect you." Harrison's eyes filled with tears of gratitude. He managed to whisper with difficulty, "Thank you, my daughter." Those were the first words he had been able to speak in 4 months. Samantha immediately called Dr. Harrison, who was moved to hear the patient speak. "It's a miracle, Samantha. The recovery is happening much faster than I expected." But the joy didn't last long. Eleanor arrived at the hospital with a private ambulance, and 2 doctors she claimed were specialists in neurological cases. Dr. Harrison, these colleagues came to examine Harrison and agreed that he needs a specific treatment that is only available in Rochester. "Eleanor, Harrison is improving. There's no need for a transfer. Doctor, with all due respect, I'm his wife and I have the legal right to decide on his treatment." The doctors Eleanor had brought were, in fact, employees of the Rochester clinic she had purchased. They had forged documents declaring Harrison in critical condition and in need of immediate transfer. Samantha realized something wrong was happening when she saw the men preparing a very strong sedative for her father. "Stop!" she shouted. "You can't sedate my father." "Miss, I've been a doctor for 20 years, lied one of the men. "Your father needs to be stabilized for the trip." Caleb, who had been watching everything from a distance, realized that Eleanor was trying to legally kidnap her own husband. He ran to call the hospital security. "Security, there's something wrong happening in room 1204. The patient's wife is trying to take him away against his will." When security arrived at the room, they found Harrison struggling on the stretcher, clearly trying to resist the sedation. "Stop everything," ordered the head of security. "No one leaves until we clarify this situation." Eleanor tried to argue that she had legal rights, but Harrison with great effort managed to say, "I don't want to go." The patient's own statement changed everything. The fake doctors were exposed when they couldn't present valid registrations with the medical board. Julian, realizing the plan had failed, tried to flee the hospital, but was intercepted by security. Dr. Harrison took full medical control of the situation and prohibited any transfer attempts until Harrison was fully recovered and capable of making his own decisions. In the following weeks, with the complete interruption of the poisons, Harrison gradually recovered his abilities. First, he was able to speak clearly again, then to move his arms and legs, and finally to eat normally. During his recovery, he told Samantha and Caleb the whole truth about what he had discovered before falling ill. "I was reviewing the company's accounts when I noticed that Julian had taken out irregular loans," said Harrison, his voice still a bit weak but clear. "When I confronted Eleanor about some strange transfers, she got very nervous." "And that's when you started to suspect?" asked Caleb. "Yes. I started investigating on my own and discovered that Eleanor was planning to have me committed to a psychiatric clinic to take control of my assets." "Is that why you were trying to write that letter?" asked Samantha. "Exactly. I wanted to leave evidence in case something happened to me, but they acted faster than I imagined." Harrison revealed that he had discovered that Eleanor was not the humble woman she pretended to be. She came from a wealthy family that had lost everything in bad investments when she was young, and ever since then, she had been obsessed with never going through financial hardship again. "Her marriage to me was never about love," said Roberto sadly. "It was always about financial security. And when she found out I planned to donate a large portion of our fortune to social projects, she fell into despair." João, who had followed the entire recovery, was moved to see Roberto finally free. "Mr. Harrison, I only did what any decent person would do." "João, you saved my life, literally. If it hadn't been for your observation and courage, I'd be in a psychiatric clinic in another country, being drugged until I completely lost my sanity." When Roberto was fully recovered, he made his decisions about the future. First, he began divorce proceedings against Christina, who had tried to argue that it had all been a misunderstanding and that she only wanted what was best for the family. "Christina, you kept me prisoner in my own body for 4 months, said Roberto, during the only conversation he agreed to have with her. "That wasn't a misunderstanding, that was torture. Roberto, please, think about everything we built together. What we built was based on your lies. You never loved me. You only loved my money." Christina was prosecuted for attempted poisoning and fraud, but Roberto decided not to seek the maximum sentence. Instead, she received a 2-year prison sentence in a semi-open regime and a restraining order keeping her away from him. Julian was also prosecuted for the irregular loans and for his participation in the scheme. He received a similar sentence and was ordered to return all the money he had embezzled. Dr. Harrison, although he had been involuntarily used in the scheme, felt responsible and decided to donate a year of his fees to research on medical poisoning. "I never want to be deceived like that again," he said to Roberto. "From now on, I'm going to question everything and independently verify any medication or treatment." Mrs. Martha, the cook, was forgiven by Roberto when it became clear that she genuinely believed she was preparing vitamins to help with his recovery. Christina had lied to her too. "Mrs. Martha," said Roberto, "you were also a victim of this scheme. Christina manipulated your good intentions." The cook, in tears, asked for forgiveness. "Mr. Harrison, if I had known I was harming you—" "I know, Mrs. Martha, you have a good heart. That's exactly why Christina was able to use you." With his life back on track, Roberto fulfilled his original promise to use part of his fortune for social projects. But now he had a very specific project in mind. He founded the Harrison Sterling Center for Neurological Recovery, specializing in cases of poisoning and muscle paralysis. The center offered free treatment for victims of crimes similar to the one he had suffered. "I want my experience to help other people going through similar situations," he said at the center's opening. João was invited to be the center's maintenance coordinator, but his role went far beyond that. Roberto considered him his closest advisor and friend. "João, you saw the truth when all the doctors and specialists were blind," said Roberto. "That taught me that sometimes wisdom doesn't come from diplomas, but from humanity and careful observation." João accepted the position, but with one condition. "Mr. Harrison, I accept, but I want to keep doing small jobs at the city's hospitals. You never know when someone else might need a person who notices what others don't see." Samantha fully took over the family business, implementing changes her father had been planning for years. She created a social responsibility program at the company and established an emergency fund for employees in need. "Dad, I've learned that success isn't just about accumulating wealth," she said. "It's about using that wealth to make a difference in people's lives." The bond between father and daughter grew enormously stronger after the traumatic experience. Samantha became not only the successor to the company, but also Harrison's confidant and best friend. Caleb continued living in his modest house in the working-class neighborhood, but now with the financial security that his new job provided. He used his salary to give his children a better education and to help neighbors in need. "Sarah," he told his wife, "this job taught me that you can make a difference in people's lives without being rich or important. You just need eyes to see and the courage to act." Sarah, who had supported her husband throughout the entire dangerous situation, was proud of his actions. "Caleb, you've always had a good heart. That's what saved that man." The recovery center became a national reference for cases of poisoning and paralysis. Doctors from across the country sent patients there, and Caleb became a respected figure in identifying suspicious symptoms. Harrison began giving lectures about his experience, warning other business leaders about the risks of blindly trusting those close to them when large fortunes were at stake. "I'm not saying to distrust everyone," he would explain, "but I am saying to always maintain a healthy vigilance over your business and your health." One of the most significant changes in Harrison's life was his approach to relationships. He became much more careful, but also more appreciative of the genuine people around him. Caleb became like a brother to him, too. The two met every Friday for dinner to talk about life, business, and above all, about how to help others. "Caleb, you taught me that the most valuable people are sometimes the simplest ones," Harrison said during one of those dinners. "You wanted nothing from me, had no ulterior motives. That's why you were able to see the truth. Mr. Harrison, I just did what I thought was right, but I learned a lot from this experience too." "What did you learn?" "I learned that you should never ignore that inner voice telling you something is wrong. And I learned that sometimes a simple person can see things that important people can't see." City General Hospital, where it all happened, created a special protocol for suspected poisoning cases, inspired by Harrison's experience. Caleb was invited to train the maintenance staff on careful patient observation. "You're in a unique position," Caleb would say during the trainings. "You see things that doctors don't see because you spend more time in the rooms and pay attention to different details." Eleanor served her sentence and then moved to another state. She tried to contact Harrison a few times, claiming she had regretted her actions, but he stuck to his decision to have no contact with her whatsoever. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting," he explained to Samantha. "I forgave your mother for my own peace of mind, but that doesn't mean I have to allow her back into my life." Julian tried to rebuild his life after serving his sentence, but struggled because the story had become public. Harrison, in a gesture of generosity, offered financial help so his former brother-in-law could start over in another city. "Why are you helping Uncle Julian after everything?" Samantha asked. "Because holding a grudge only hurts the one holding it," Harrison replied. Julian was weak and greedy, but he wasn't evil by nature like his mother. He deserves a second chance. The story of Harrison's miraculous recovery and the discovery of the scheme by a simple carpenter became known throughout the city and inspired many people. Caleb began receiving invitations to tell his story at schools and community organizations. "The message I want to convey," he would say, "is that each one of us can make a difference. You don't need to be rich, you don't need to be famous, you just need to pay attention to what's happening around you and have the courage to act when something is wrong." Harrison recovered completely, with no physical after-effects from the poisoning. But the emotional scars stayed with him for a long time. He developed a natural distrust of people who approached him out of financial self-interest. On the other hand, he developed a deep appreciation for simple, honest people. His inner circle of employees came to be made up of people like Caleb, honest, hard-working, with no ulterior motives. The recovery center grew and expanded to other cities. Caleb became director of operations, a position he never imagined he would hold, but for which he proved naturally talented. "Mr. Caleb," Harrison would joke, "you went from carpenter to director without even realizing it. That proves that competence and character are more important than diplomas." Samantha married a few years later a doctor she met during her father's recovery. The wedding was modest, but Harrison was moved to see his daughter choose a man out of genuine love, not for status or money. "Daddy," Samantha said on the wedding day, "thank you for teaching me, even without meaning to, the difference between true love and self-interest." "What do you mean?" "By seeing how Mom treated you, I learned to recognize when someone truly loves and when someone is only interested in what the person has." Years later, when Harrison was already 65, he took stock of his life and realized that the most terrible period had become the most transformative. "Caleb," he said at one of their Friday dinners, "you saved much more than my life. You saved my soul." "What do you mean, Mr. Harrison?" "I was becoming a bitter, distrustful person, focused only on accumulating more money. That experience, as terrible as it was, taught me what truly matters in life. And what matters? True relationships, purpose, making a difference in people's lives. Those are things you always knew and that I had to nearly lose my life to learn." Caleb smiled. "You know, Mr. Harrison, sometimes I think we met exactly at the right moment. You needed someone who would see the truth, and I needed to learn that a simple person can do important things." The Harrison Sterling Center became one of the country's leading health institutions. Patients came from all states to receive treatment, and the staff grew to include the best specialists in neurology and toxicology. But Caleb always insisted that the basic principles be maintained: careful observation, attention to details others might overlook, and the willingness to question when something didn't seem right. Harrison created a scholarship fund that offered grants to the children of hospital maintenance workers, inspired by his own experience with Caleb. "Talent and intelligence exist in every social class," he would say. "Sometimes opportunity is all that's missing." The friendship between Harrison and Caleb became legendary at the hospital and in the community. People of all ages came to ask the two for advice, and they complemented each other perfectly. Harrison with his business experience and Caleb with his practical wisdom about life. Dr. Harrison, deeply marked by the experience, became one of the most careful and inquisitive doctors at the hospital. He developed safety protocols that were adopted by hospitals across the country. "I learned that trusting is important," he would say, "but verifying is essential." Martha, the cook, was hired by the recovery center to prepare special meals for the patients. She became one of the most beloved employees, always attentive to any sign that something might be wrong with the patient's food. "I never want to be used to harm anyone again," she would say. "Now I know I need to question everything, even when it comes from important people." The story of Harrison and Caleb inspired the creation of training programs in other hospitals, where employees from all areas learned to identify suspicious signs and communicate their concerns without fear of retaliation. Harrison never remarried. He said he had learned to be happy with himself and with the genuine relationships he had built. "Loneliness isn't having no one by your side," he philosophized. "It's being surrounded by false people. I'd rather be alone with true friends than accompanied by self-serving people." Caleb continued living in the same house, in the same neighborhood, but now as a respected figure in the community. He created a neighborhood help program where he fixed small maintenance problems for free for underprivileged families. "Life gave me more than I deserved," he would say. "Now it's my turn to give back." His children grew up proud of their father, and 2 of them chose careers in healthcare, inspired by the story they had witnessed. Caleb's youngest decided to study medicine, and always said he wanted to be like Mr. Harrison and his father, a person who uses their position to help others. Samantha had 3 children and made sure they knew the story of their grandfather and Uncle Caleb, as they called the carpenter. "I want you to learn," she would tell her children, "that heroes don't wear capes. Sometimes they wear work overalls and carry a toolbox." The recovery center established a tradition. Every year on the anniversary of the discovery of Harrison's poisoning, they held a ceremony in honor of careful observers, hospital employees who had identified suspicious situations and saved lives. Caleb always got emotional at these ceremonies when he saw how many people had been inspired by his story to pay more attention and act when necessary. "You all understood the message," he would tell the honorees. "No matter what your role is, you can make a difference in someone's life." Harrison created a foundation that investigated suspected poisoning cases across the country, offering free medical and legal resources to victims without financial means. "How many people must be going through what I went through," he would say, "without someone like Caleb to notice that something is wrong?" The foundation saved dozens of lives in its first years of operation, identifying poisoning cases that had been misdiagnosed as rare diseases. Caleb became a consultant for the foundation, training investigators to observe details that highly qualified professionals sometimes missed because they were too focused on technical aspects. "Specialization is important," he would teach, "but sometimes it's the simple eye that sees what's obvious." Over the years, the story became a book, then a documentary, and finally a film. Harrison and Caleb insisted that all profits go to public health programs. "We don't want to make money from our story," said Harrison. "We want it to keep saving lives." The film was a success, not so much for its dramatic elements, but for its message of hope and the proof that ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary feats. Caleb, who had never imagined his life would become a movie, joked, "My Sarah always said I was stubborn when it came to noticing things. Now people from all over the world come asking how I do it." The secret, he would explain, wasn't any special skill. You just have to genuinely care about people and pay attention to what they're trying to say, even when they can't speak. Harrison, at 70 years old, remained active in leading the foundation and the recovery center. His health was perfect, with no lingering effects from the poisoning. "People ask if I'm angry about the time I lost," he would say, "but I didn't lose time. I gained a new perspective on life." Caleb, also aging well, kept doing small maintenance jobs, even though he didn't need the money. "It's my way of keeping an eye on things," he explained. "You never know when someone might need help." The friendship between the two remained strong until the end of their lives. They met religiously every Friday, now accompanied by their children and grandchildren. Uncle Caleb, one of Harrison's granddaughters, would ask, How did you know Grandpa was okay on the inside, even when he couldn't speak? Because the eyes don't lie, my dear, Caleb would answer, and your grandfather had the eyes of someone desperate to tell the truth. The story of the businessman and the carpenter became a symbol that the truth always finds a way to come to light, especially when there are people willing to see it and act on it. Harrison wrote in his memoirs, "I learned that true wealth isn't what you have, but the people who genuinely care about you. Caleb saved me without wanting anything in return." That's the definition of a true friend. Caleb, in his own simple biography, wrote, "I discovered that God uses ordinary people to do important things. We just need to be willing to see and to act when our conscience calls us." The last recorded conversation between the two friends, when they were both already over 80, summed up the essence of the entire journey. "Caleb, if you could go back in time, would you do it all again?" "Of course, Mr. Harrison. But honestly, I didn't do anything special. I just paid attention." "You paid attention and had the courage to act. That made all the difference. And you? Would you do anything differently?" "Yes. I would have paid more attention to people from the start. I would have valued true friendships more, but at least I learned this in time to enjoy it." They laughed together, as they had for over 30 years, since that day at the hospital, when a simple carpenter noticed something the best doctors couldn't see. End of story. And you, dear listener, what did you think of this story about courage, true friendship, and the importance of paying attention to the details? Tell us in the comments if you've ever witnessed a situation where a simple person made all the difference. Subscribe to the channel for more touching stories.